Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March meeting of the Commuter Rail Committee. Welcome everybody this morning. Before we start the public comment period, I just wanted to remind everybody on public comments that public comment speakers are limited to 2 minutes, and it is not a question and answer period. It is strictly an opportunity for speakers to make whatever comments they would like because of the time constraints. But if you do have a question, one of the staff either will get back to you at some time, hopefully quickly, or all the information, of course, is on the MTA website. So we would urge you to utilize that also for your answers to any questions with regard to public hearings or any other pieces of information. With that, we will start the public comment period. Mr. Barry Adler.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to speak this morning on the Metro North schedule changes that will come before you in this book. I just want to comment on the Harlem line schedule changes in particular, and the elimination of the 7:45 a.m. train from White Plains, which is the current 6:58 from Southeast, which will no longer be stopping at White Plains. That is an important stop on that train. The trains are very crowded in that time of morning. Right now you have a 7:41, 7:45, and a 7:51. I'm just going to make the other two trains more crowded, and I would like to hope you would reconsider and put that stop back in the end of June. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Orrin Getz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. My name is Orrin Getz, representing the New Jersey Association of Rail Passengers. Yesterday, I attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Pearl River, New York. It's the second largest St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York State and the third largest in the nation. Metro North provides service to Pearl River on Sundays, and I think it would be a great marketing opportunity for Metro North to get involved with this next year. It will be their 50th anniversary and will be a way of promoting Metro North services west of Hudson. Also, I was at the New Jersey Transit Board meeting on March 9th, and New Jersey Transit is implementing a new program. It's called Scorecard. And I provided a copy to Howard Permit and to Helena Williams because it's an interesting program and we should follow it closely. New Jersey Transit is developing metrics to make its system more transparent to the public and provide everybody a better visibility in how the organization is providing its services. And I think it's something that we should look at very closely and see how this works out for New Jersey Transit because it could be a great idea for Metro North and Long Island Railroad. Also, there is a problem in the morning since train 1600 was canceled earlier last year. Now there's no way of getting into Lower Manhattan by 7 o'clock. If train 1602 was moved up by 3 minutes, the necessary path connection could be made to make sure that the people can get to work in Lower Manhattan on the Pascack Valley line by 7 o'clock. And I think that's very important. It's something for Metro North to work on with New Jersey Transit. One final item, we have to thank Metro North. They did improve the performance of train 1629, one of my favorite trains, the evening Pascack Valley line express train to Pearl River and Nanuet. It now operates 5 minutes faster under the new schedule, and I know all the commuters appreciate the faster ride. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murray Bowden.
Morning. Mock turtleneck and jeans works for Steve Jobs. I figured I'll give it a shot. I did finally meet with 5 members of the Metro North senior staff. I asked about the train ticket booth, and they said, we're not going to do anything with the ticket booth because we may start selling tickets again. I asked to meet with you, Howard, quite some time ago, and in fact, you should not have met with me, but assigned the 5 people who did meet with me. And so I got a letter on paper last week saying there was a meeting, which I didn't read the letter because I should have gotten an email. I would like to get the minutes of this meeting pushed to me as an email so I don't have to go look for it, because I use an iPad and I can't go to your website, download it, and then use it here. I was forced to get a paper copy this morning because I couldn't do it all. Now, you can send me a notice that says the train's late. It's time you sent a notice that said, here is the new information. And when you put something that comes out in the morning, it would come pushed to me on a train, and I could download it and read it before I get here. The members of the board should be required to read the minutes the night before, the same as I am. And a recitation of everything that's in that paper copy would save an enormous amount of time here. You're wasting my time and you're wasting everybody else's time, and the meeting runs too long. So, if I'm required to read it the night before, so are the board members. If the board members can't read it the night before, get off the board. You're very good at getting your picture on the television, but you're not good at paying attention. The M8 cars are 2 years too late, mostly because you didn't pay attention and you didn't ask the right questions. The right questions are, how come you're sending me a paper copy of a letter? It should have been an email. And when are you going to shape up? And I think that maybe, as I recommended Chris Ward retire, that you consider retiring too. Because Chris Ward blew it at the last NIMTIC meeting. You don't walk out and disrespect everybody sitting in a room. You either come to the meeting and stay there, or you don't. Now, there's a new world out there. Chris Christie changed it. The rules are new. We get to ask questions. We expect you to be at a town meeting where I can ask you things and you're forced to answer them. You're not forced to answer them here, and times have changed. I have had reasonable questions and you haven't answered them. This is a representative of what I took off of the Hartsdale Station, which is now a historical site. A year ago, we could have done something with it. Now we'll have to do something different. Your staff told me they will not go to the Greenberg Police Department and get the original out. You got 5 people from your staff that were at that meeting. Now, I've about had it. And so has everybody else. It's time to be responsible, and you have not acted responsibly. Your staff tells me they're going to keep the ticket booths because they're going to open them again. The one in Grand Central should be the museum, and the museum should be rented out. And I think that you're not following the kind of things that need to be done today. And so you ought to consider retiring, or this board ought to fire you.
Thank you very much. I have the minutes of February 17th, which I know we all read last night. I know that very well. Any comments or suggestions on the minutes? If not, motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Thank you. Long Island Railroad. Helena.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I would like to, in my opening remarks, address 2 items. One is my thanks to Mike Caradniciano and his staff for the event that they planned on Friday to commemorate the launch of the tunnel boring equipment for the East Side Access Project on the Queens side. I'd like to thank Commissioner Ira Greenberg for attending. It was really a wonderful site in terms of engineering complexity. It is the beginning of the Queenside tunneling, and we, of course, are very excited about it. Many times I have referred to East Side Access as the Long Island Railroad's moonshot, that just as the aerospace industry was transformed in the 60s by the race to the moon, Long Island Railroad will be transformed by our race to get to Grand Central Terminal. My analogy couldn't have been more perfect when you saw how high-tech the 2 tunnel boring machines are. They looked just like space capsules, just incredibly complex. Mike did a great job of really walking me through exactly how it'll be done. We have put together, I think, a tremendous work plan with his staff, our force account, safety being one of our is, of course, our highest priority. And we will be working closely together to ensure that the tunneling can be done in a safe and efficient way. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for the really good work. Second, I wanted to update the committee on the two railroads' effort to move forward with federal legislation requiring positive train control. As you know, our commitment to positive train control is very clear. We think that it is a technology that will aid safety. We're very committed to the safest train operations we can have. However, the fact that there's a unfunded federal mandate telling us that we have to have systems in place by 2015 has been a tremendous concern for us. It is not a technology that is perfected. There is no funding available, and there are many complications with radio spectrum which is needed to operate positive train control. So Howard and I have been very engaged on a national level in meeting with House representatives, Senate representatives, to ask for additional time. We've also been very much working with rail leaders and public transit across the United States, and we have asked for an extension of time to 2018. Representative Micah held a hearing on Thursday. The industry representative was able to present very good testimony outlining our position, which is consistent, of course, with almost all of the rail providers. I do want to note one exception, which is Metrolink in California. They are very committed to implementing positive train control by 2012 because, of course, they were the site of the very terrible, tragic accident that really spurred passage of the legislation. Howard, any additional comments on that? No. Okay. So with that, we're going to go right to our status of operations and safety report. Yep, sure.
Jim?
Yes. Any question?
At the hearing, were there other persons giving testimony, and from what areas, and just some idea of the back and forth on this?
I will actually email the committee members a copy of the testimony. There were representatives from California that spoke. There was our representative who runs the Florida system who spoke. There was some give and take in terms of questions. AAR representing the freights also testified. The freight industry, which also has to comply with positive train control, has slightly different issues. They are looking for remapping, and they seem to have gotten a settlement in a lawsuit that they filed, changing the date for remapping. The FRA had said 2008. They were pushing for 2015. And they appear to have succeeded in achieving that. Remapping will allow them to limit the number of track miles that they have to put PTC in, and therefore limit their costs. They're going to do that by rerouting trains that carry hazardous materials. So they were a very large component. And I will share with you, part of the hearing was also some of the victims of the terrible tragedy in Chatsworth. There's a cap on liability at $200 million, and they were proposing that the liability cap be raised. So it was, a hearing that covered a multiple number of topics, all under the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 2008. The House is very focused on the President's statement that we have to look carefully at regulation, and are there regulations that are putting too great a burden on state and local government. And we certainly are advocating that this is one of those regulations. Howard has a system that has tremendous cab signaling. Long Island Railroad has a little less cab signaling. We think those investments should be recognized as putting us in a higher plateau for safety to begin with, which then should give us more time in our dense, complex systems to implement PTC. Anything? Okay, good. Ray?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The operating report starts on page number 15 of our committee book. And the on-time performance goal for the Long Island Railroad is 95.1%. For the month of February, we met that goal, exactly 95.1%. Our total peak on-time performance was 93.2%, with the AM peak finishing at 94.1 and the PM ending at 92.2. February's total off-peak was 95.8%, with the weekday finishing at 96.1% and the weekend ending at 95.2%. During February, 98.4% of the peak trains met our seating standard, 99.4% of scheduled trips were completed, and 166 trains operated more than 15 minutes late. Our year-to-date on-time performance ending on February 28th is as follows. Overall on-time performance, 92%. Total peak is 87.7%, with the AM peak finishing at 86.4 and the PM ending at 89. The total off-peak was 93.7, with the weekday off-peak finishing at 96.2 and the weekend off-peak ending at 92.3. We had 4 100% rush hours during the month of February, 2 in the morning peak and 2 in the afternoon peak. And year-to-date, there have been 9 100% rush hours, 5 in the morning peak and 4 in the afternoon. Our AM peak car availability was met each day in February, and the total fleet MBDF of 110,000 was exceeded in January. And I note that's January. There's a 1 month lag in reporting the MBDF. Moving on to safety, reportable employee accidents were down 37%, customer accidents down 45%, rail incidents were flat with just 1. The most significant event of the month that caused a disruption of service was an eastbound Huntington train, number 1730, experienced equipment trouble during the PM rush hour right outside of Penn Station on Friday, February 4th, and that resulted in 79 late and canceled trains. That concludes the operating report, and I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Any
Yes, sir.
questions? Yes, Charles.
Taking a look on page 16, I note that your AM peak as compared with last year in terms of the month of February is certainly higher, and the same cannot be said with the PM peak. And my only point is, it is the off-peak hours that increase the statistics so that you have the 95.1% and the 92% overall is a result of the fact that the off-peak hours, when the trains are virtually empty or are not as occupied, that would increase the amount of the statistics. Am I wrong?
Well, every train counts the same. We do group them in AM and PM, and what you are saying is true, that the off-peak numbers are increasing our overall number.
All right.
I think part of that also relates to the fact that because of the substantial number of additional trains in the AM or PM period, any issue or event which happens clearly causes more trains to be affected than they would in the off-peak scenarios, such as the Huntington train. If the Huntington train had happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as opposed to when it happened at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the number of trains would have been significantly different affected. Now, that's no excuse for the train happening. It's just it does tend to skew the numbers when the event occurs.
Valid point. May I turn to the vandalism report on page 18, or the categories of delay?
Yes, sir.
I noticed vandalism is way up, and I wondered what had been done to deal with that in terms of going forward.
Would the chief like to answer that, or should I?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
If you look at page 20, vandalism as compared with last year is significantly higher.
Page 18. Page 18.
Page 18,
Page 18,
yes.
I'm sorry. Page 18.
So that in February, for example, of 2011, you had 12 incidents. You had only 9 the year before. In January, you had 20. I'm trying to get a handle on what is going on, and is there anything you can do about it?
We look at criminal mischief if there's a damage to a train. And we look at graffiti. I'd have to check my statistics and see if they match the vandalism, because the railroad's going to be checking their equipment, looking for different things. We do police the right-of-way, and there is debris on the right-of-way, which sometimes is going to cause the vandalism, and we also look at individuals. If we catch people doing it, obviously we're going to arrest them and summons them. I'm
just going to jump in. One of the examples, and I think we did have a specific incident of this in February. We work very closely with the police. For example, we get kids that want to put, they push shopping carts out on the right-of-way. And then the train will hit it, and of course that will disable the train. So on page 18, you're seeing, incidents, categories of delay related to vandalism that's occurring on the tracks that then interrupt the train service. We have done some very, specialized approaches, like if we can, if it's not so mangled, if we can identify, for example, where the shopping cart came from, we'll go back to that retailer, that usually they're grocery stores, supermarkets, and we will try to, work with police to station somebody there, watch what's going on with kids. We do have a couple of repeat locations. Kathleen, can you we've worked sort of specially on this.
We've been targeting the Copeg area because in Copeg itself in the past 2 months, we've had 4 incidents of debris being placed. We're targeting that area. Our right-of-way task force is in the process of doing a cleanup in the area, working with the track department and all, and we closely monitor the activity in the area. In addition, they're looking at possible fencing solutions to it, so we are investigating all of that.
That is just terrific. My purpose in focusing on this was during the tenure of the prior mayor of the city of New York, there was clear proof that vandalism inevitably led to other crimes, the same perpetrators doing things that are worse. And to the extent you can nip this in the bud at an early date, the better off we all are.
Yes. Absolutely.
And of course, it can cause substantial damage to a train. So we are really on top of this one.
Thank you.
Could you, when the issue of the fencing is decided at Copay, could you give the board a report back in regard to that? Because I know, while it is impossible to fence all the right-of-way of both commuter rails, I know that fencing has been used in selected places to have what we would hope would have meaningful positive impact. And if you could provide us with whatever decision is made in Copay, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And my
And you, Charles, you got another one? Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, Charles,
Go ahead, finish.
My last question relates to pages 21 and 22. Referring to the Huntington line to which you referred to, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that the standees there are disproportionately high in the AM peak, and that on the Long Beach branch, they similarly are disproportionately high during AM peak. Why, and what are you doing about it?
We have, and Mr. Blair had asked the same question. In each case, we have a train that is at a maximum consist. It has the most cars that it can have. In the case in Huntington, there is no more room to lay up another 12-car train. And because of the fact that we run west on both tracks, west of Hicksville, we can't get another train out there. So that train has 10 cars, could easily use 12, but there is no way to really manipulate that and have that run reliably. And we have a situation on the Long Beach branch which is similar in that the train gets several connections at Jamaica. The problem is really west of Jamaica. We have not been able to do microsurgery to fix that yet. It's something that is an issue.
Any possibility that down the road there's something can be done for these folks?
The only thing is, at Huntington would be some sort of infrastructure improvement, like a new yard or...
Wait, let me just mention that you have hit a subject that Ray talks to me about at least least 2 or 3 times a week. He'll wander in and go, and don't forget I need a yard in Huntington.
That's a good idea.
Yes. Of course, with the challenges of East Side access and the ability to provide more train service from people's home stations, there will be enormous pressure on the Huntington line to be able to bring customers to Grand Central, bring customers to Penn. So we are going to be, meeting with local officials and talking about what we can do to improve storage of trains, improve capacity.
It's just the numbers in those two
Right.
just jump out at you.
Right.
For those who, all of us read these books, though others
Right.
might think we don't.
The issue of storage yards on Long Island has been and unfortunately will continue to be a very contentious issue. But, the 199 people who stand, and hopefully the thousands more, which may also be affected if and when the economy continues to improve and East Side access allows the railroad to run more trains, are going to be affected by the inability of the railroad and elected officials to locate new yards on Long Island. It is as simple as that, because you can't run a train east to then run it west. You have to have it where you need it to start. And Huntington and Ronkonkoma and other places are going to be affected by those situations. They have gone on for many years, unfortunately, because of the railroad's inability or the elected officials' inability to help the railroad locate a new yard. And all we're going to be able to do is continue to press them to tell them of the importance of the issue. And we continue, and I know from my perspective, I continue to do that in Suffolk County, and we will continue to do so.
I'm going to add to that. I appreciate Commissioner Myrtle's interest, because almost 90% of what he said, I was going to say some of the same things. But to add to this, just on the standees chart, you know that those official standees, that assumes that every seat is taken. We know on a Long Island Railroad train, even on a Metro North train, that middle seat often is left, and people will not sit in it; they'd rather stand. So you can imagine the congestion and how bad some of these trains are. I do hear it from the chair of the Long Island Railroad Commuters Council, who does ride that branch. So just so you know, it is severe. And on-time performance, that branch also sees not great on-time performance because of the congestion. If you have a track out of the main line, not that I want to belabor main line issues again, we all know them, third track, but that's what causes our on-time performance to be off. But on another, I want to congratulate the railroad on what I thought was a shocking MDBF for the dual modes. It's 68,662 for this month, I believe. Right?
68,662, that's correct, yes.
And if that keeps up for 2 months, that's more than just a fluke, right?
Right.
Well, let's cross our fingers, because that would bring the number. Because I'm looking at the 12-month MDF rolling average, and I did ask at the last meeting that we see a report about what we can, going forward, what we can do about these dual modes and diesel electrics, and I'm looking forward to that, because I know the consultant had done that.
I was assuming, you thought the comma was in the wrong place.
No, that would be. Forget. I'm not going to make a Metro North.
But I mean,
that's unfair. No.
I think it's clear, as we all know, the railroad is trying to run a 21st century system on 20th century infrastructure on Long Island. Most Long Islanders want to take the train, but don't want the inconvenience of what the railroad needs to run the train efficiently. And I'm sure my compatriots from Metro North have similar experiences. It is an unfortunate fact of life that people want the ability to have good service, but don't want the inconvenience of what the railroad needs in their community to provide it. And that is a continuing battle on Long Island, as I'm sure it is in the Hudson Valley also. Less somewhat in the city, because at least in the city, other than the buses, much of it is underground. If we could figure out how to put an underground yard on Long Island, we might succeed. But it's unfortunate we can't do that. So it is, whether it's third track or the new storage yard in Suffolk County or Colonial Bridge in Great Neck, the railroad continues to run into impediments in that regard. And as I said, I'm sure my Hudson Valley compatriots have the same number of issues in their place. It's an unfortunate fact of life.
On one other thing, on categories of delay, I'd mentioned in the past engineering, and especially when people get email alerts, not this past month, but it was in, I believe, January and maybe December. There was a rash of signal problems, especially on the Babylon branch. Someone said another signal problem, and there seems to be a serious decline in that. I don't know why, or whether. I know engineering is other things too. I'd love to see a breakout of the signal problems, because I know there's a project that's going to be in April 9th that's going to hopefully alleviate some of the signal issues.
They'll redo two interlocks in Amityville.
So it'd be good to take a look. It'd be good to see the signal problems broken out, so we could see if there's a sharp decline in signal problems, then we could say, look, we did all these signal projects. It's decreased delays by so much. It'd be a great thing for us to run around and say how great it is. And if you want better service, give us more money from Albany. So it'd be good. I know this is by department, but it'd be good to see a breakout, because I always say we need capital projects that get people to work on time. So
Anyone else?
that's it for operating.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, we're going to turn to Mark Young on our finance and ridership report.
Good morning. The ridership report begins on page 27. I would say the two major themes of the month are, one, ridership was up for the Long Island Railroad in the month of February compared to February 2010. Like the MDBF discussion, hopefully we have 2 more months of that. Maybe we'll consider it a trend. On the budget side, I would say, of course, with only 1 month of actuals, it's kind of, it's just 1 month. It's hard to make any real informed decisions about what may happen in the rest of the year. Although the weather events did have a major effect on our overtime usage, which I'll get to during the report. First, I usually report on ridership. The book itself, on page 45, has the old ridership numbers that we spoke about last session, but I'll discuss the joint memo we submitted to the board members. During the month of February, we carried 5.8 million passengers. That was 0.4% greater than February of 2010, and it's only the second time in a year, over a year, that we've had growth year to year. And two of those 2 months were both in the last 4 months, so hopefully this is the sign of something positive for the Long Island Railroad. Commutation was down 1.5% for the month. But one piece of good news, of course, is the employment rates are improving in the professional sector and the finance sector, so we hope that'll have a positive effect on commutation. Non-commutation was up 3.5% during the month of February, so that's our second best non-commutation month in over a year. Ticket sales on all types improved, other than the 10-trip ticket, which may have been related to with the fare increase. There may have been people who had purchased 10-trip tickets in December, and there may be a bit of a lag there, so we need to see on the 10 trips over the next few months. Year to date, we did have a ridership numbers that were low in January. So year to date, total ridership is still down 2.8% compared to 2010. Commutation is down 3%, and non-com was down 2.4%. On budget, that report begins on page 28. Most of the figures that I'll refer to are in the table on page 29, although the summary is on page 28. The railroad, Long Island Railroad, generated $51 million in revenue during January. That was $10 million less than the budget. The majority of that is capital and other reimbursements. There was $7 million below forecast. That was basically due to delayed east side access purchasing and materials usage. Capital project activity that was below forecast due to weather events. And also to the fact that we are due reimbursement from the BSC from some of our employees that have been transferred to the BSC. And there's just a timing issue with the revenue. And also, of course, since January was a low ridership month, that $2 million in fare box revenue below forecast. On expense, Long Island Railroad spent $142 million in January. That was $5 million favorable to the budget. Straight time spending was 1.7% greater than budget. That was largely due to the fact that there were less vacancies than we had anticipated when we originally did the budget last year. Overtime spending, as I mentioned before, overtime spending of $7 million was $1.6 million over budget. The budget this year will be tough. I mean, we're aggressive, and we believe we'll get there, but it's coming off of the 12.7% reduction and $13 million reduction in 2010, and we have another $4 million target for 2011. Nevertheless, the overage for the month was almost entirely due to the 4 significant weather events we had during the month of January. 22,000 more hours worked over budget for weather. Non-labor expenses were $6 million favorable, mostly in materials. And then lastly, to wrap up, the fare box operating ratio was 41.5%. Excluding the unfunded pension liability, it was 45.5%. The cost per passenger was $17.57. That was versus a budget of $16.12. And lastly, the revenue per passenger was $7.29 versus a budget of $7.14. That concludes the finance report.
Any questions? Charles?
With respect to the unfunded pension liability, is that a determination on the part of management not to fund?
No. The Long Island Railroad is currently on a plan to in 2004, there was a major review of the Long Island Railroad's pension fund and what the true liability was for years to come. And at that time, the Long Island Railroad with the MTA agreed to be, we're basically on a 30-year plan to fund our pension liability to the point where it's at a threshold that would be acceptable.
Okay, and Mark, as a piece of history, this is a pension plan that resulted actually from a strike in 1973. And then was closed as a result of a strike in 1988. So it is a pension plan that covers workers just hired during that period of time. It's a closed pension plan. It was never funded. There was no plan for funding it when it was created and when it was closed. Thereafter, there were, some payments, made, of course, in a periodic way, but it was recognized that there was unfunded liability attached to it. There was something much bigger that had to be dealt with. That's when the 2004 plan came about, and since then there's been substantial funding. I'm always trying to understand the goal of funding an unfunded pension plan, and I believe the goal is, when the majority of those in the plan are retired, that it will be funded. But we always assess that goal.
How many people are estimated to be within the framework of that plan?
There's about 900 left of current employees that are covered by that plan.
And are payments being regularly made to those who are retired under that plan?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, the majority? Yeah.
There are about 6,300 retirees already who are receiving pension benefits. And then, as Helena Williams mentioned, there are about 600 to 700 existing employees who still can retire out of that plan.
In fact, this may be the year that we actually have more retirees than actual employees. So that's, a very important burden that we carry, and we have to go forward funding that pension plan.
The only reason I focus on this is the cause of problems of many pension plans throughout the country, the absence of timely funding.
Anyone else on finance? Jim?
Mark, and this will be Kim as well, I guess. Excuse me. I note that that the depreciation numbers are identical for actual and budget. And I'm just wondering, is that because it's first of the year, or what's the deal on that?
Depreciation is calculated for Metro North based on the actual assets are in place, as well as capital projects that are in construction. And so during the year, the depreciation will be booked based on the budget, and on a quarterly and an annual basis, they'll be updated based on an evaluation of how many assets are in place at that time. So you will find it follows the budget other than those periods of the updates.
Anyone else? Okay.
And our capital program highlights are at page 53. I've mentioned the most significant, which was East Side Access. If there are no questions, I'm going to move on.
Any questions on capital program? Okay.
Okay, and our information items start on page 59. And I am pleased to note that we have submitted a ridership report that is actually the first time both railroads are submitting a very detailed annual ridership report at the same time. We've already spent a lot of time talking about the Long Island Railroad's 2010 experience, so I'm not going to go over, the fire, the blizzard, the hurricane, the tornado again. Instead, let me focus on, the 2011 outlook, which appears on page 60. While we did start out the year with, the winter from hell, we are nicely moving, I think, towards spring. You heard the ridership trends for February. They're very encouraging. Train service, I think, was very, substantially improved in February over January because the weather improved so much. We will be watching very closely, the rebounding local economy. The pressure on gas prices generally sends more people to the railroad, and we will look for where we gain that extra ridership and measure it against the impact of the service reductions last year. Because we are feeling the impact of those reductions. We're trying to make some adjustments that may make sense and recapture some of that ridership. We also, I am going to point out, from a revenue perspective, we've done very well on our getaway packages, and we're going to continue to concentrate on those. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving.
Any questions on Jim?
Yeah, I'm sorry to be question.
No, that's okay.
Vain today. Helena, and this would apply to Metro North as well. In the unexpected impact comments here, we note the blizzard in December and a hurricane in September. If my experience over my extended life has been correct, that is when those things generally occur. And my question is, to what extent do you factor into your budgets these, so-called anomalous events? Because I think that they're predictably anomalous, and I would say that we want to give ourselves a chance to say, well, we did way better than what we expected because the blizzard didn't occur, rather than continually kind of fighting the facts that we know are likely to occur year to year or over a longer period of time.
Your question covers a whole host of issues from a planning perspective. First and foremost, from a safety perspective, we drill constantly. We always drill in our winter operations plan for the worst case scenario. We do a hurricane drill as well. So from a preparation point of view, even if an event like the December 26th blizzard hadn't occurred since 1996, we are still, always preparing and ready from a safety perspective. From a, how to, do better in terms of performance during those kinds of events.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we should try to capture the anomalies in the budget process, so that if we know that there are going to be, or we suspect that there's going to be a blizzard, let's put in a blizzard factor so that those numbers get adjusted appropriately, and we're not continually, fighting a negative battle to say, well, we had a blizzard this year, therefore we're behind our numbers.
I'm not sure, let me say that money has not been a factor. The MTA has not said to us, watch your budget and don't go out there and clean trash.
I don't think that's the point. I think Jim's point is this. You have on page, and it's an interesting
59.
context. You have on page 59, okay, 3 unexpected events.
Right.
118,000 passengers, 127,000 passengers, 10,000 passengers. So therefore, if you add them up, you lost, because of unexpected events, 240,000 riders.
Right.
Okay. His question is, in your preparation of your 010 budget, or now in your 011 budget and infinitum, did you budget for any factors which would have caused some of those passengers not to have occurred, so that if it doesn't occur, you have more passengers than you would have thought of, but when it does occur, you have less. You would have had the same number of passengers. I think that's Jim's question.
Is it a question on revenue?
No, it's a question just on
No, how you project.
Well,
how you project.
if I could jump, on two
question of how you
sides,
project.
expense and revenue.
Right.
The expense side, often, as you heard, weather events can cause overtime. So what we do on the budget side for that is we use a 5-year rolling average. So we take the 5 years, which we think is a reasonable estimate.
Okay.
And this year happened to be this past year was beyond the 5-year average. As far as the ridership side, the revenue, of course, every year includes a certain number of special events, and we build our ridership projections and revenue off of a sort of what I would call in the budget a baseline number of special events. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Jim,
that's what I thought.
Jim,
Sure.
Right, that's what I thought.
you had asked about us as well, so we follow the same process. So if there's a baseline, you assume the issue becomes when in a given year you have more than you anticipate. So, for example, this year with the blizzards, we didn't project that level. So you project some level, and then if it's higher than that or lower than that, you see it.
It's to some degree under unexpected impacts, trying to figure out the success or failure of the Mets and Yankees, which also clearly impact ridership numbers at both railroads. And depending upon how many games they win, I was going to weave that in somehow, and therefore how many people go has an impact on expense and revenue projections for the railroads. We will not ask either railroad what their projections were for the success. We just hope that they will be beneficial in the months ahead.
I will
And
note,
with that,
though,
we will move to the next
did
item.
you see the 80,000 customer loss?
I saw that. I saw that. I read the report. Go ahead. Go ahead. Next.
And with that, we're going to turn to our annual human resources. I'm sorry, annual human resources and EEO report, and that is on page 90. I would ask you to just take a look at page 95. As you can see, in 2010, Long Island Railroad only had 9 new hires. We had about 194 retirees, so we haven't done much in the hiring category. Any questions on this report?
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, on page
Track.
102, we have our track program, and I do want to highlight, of course, in this track program, you will see the signal project that Ira Greenberg already referenced, the Amityville-Wantaw Signal Improvement Project. That'll affect the Babylon branch on the weekend of April 9th and 10th. I'm very pleased to say that we have bridge busing, and we are promoting that customers certainly can use all the other branches. We're trying to identify, branches that will have, service and parking available. So customers who still want to ride the railroad can go from the Babylon branch up to the main line, or they can stay on the Babylon branch, use the bus, and then they'll be able to pick up a train again in Freeport. So we're working very hard on a communication strategy on that, customer outreach, so everyone will be aware of the transportation alternatives available for that weekend. We also have the Montauk Branch switch surfacing, which takes 2 main tracks out of service for 12 hours from Babylon to Sayville, and that's a single track outage, Sayville to Patchogue. And that will be on Saturday, April 30th into Sunday morning. So that will have some busing and a revised train schedule for Patchogue East. And again, we'll do a very large customer outreach on both of those. Any questions?
Any questions on either of those 2 items? If not, Howard, Metro
Okay.
North.
Thank you. Good morning. I have a few comments, and I basically wanted to take the board through where we are on a number of different items that were weather-related. As I think we all know, we had a severe winter, particularly on the New Haven line. So let me take you through a series of items, some of which, quite frankly, are still not resolved, and I'll show you some pictures of that. So the first major thing was with the storms on the New Haven line is we put in the special schedule in February. Special schedule was very successful. It did what we wanted to do, which was stabilize the operation. We were able to improve on-time performance into the 95% range. It had been running literally in the peak periods in the 50% range. We had severe overcrowding. We handled that. And through a host of good efforts, including the work in the shops, where we had about half the cars out of service at the worst of the storm, we were able to bring that number down. We went back to the regular schedule on March 7th, and that worked very well. So we're back on a regular schedule. The schedule is performing well, and I think that we are on the upswing in terms of the service. We're definitely on the upswing in terms of the service on the New Haven line. We're not there. We still have a backlog of cars that have to be fixed, but we're well on our way on that front. The second thing to mention on the New Haven line was good news in that we've now rolled out 2 train sets of M8s. These are the new cars that are coming to the New Haven line. We have 1 more train set will come in April. We should have 80 M8 cars by the end of the year. Then it's a multi-year delivery thereafter. I will point out we will still, in the next couple of winters, still have the old fleet. So this is not a panacea that we'll have solved all our problems. But having the 80 cars is very beneficial. I'll also mention, as we all know, with the earthquake in Japan, we have been in constant conversation with Kawasaki to determine what, if any, impact the earthquake will have on the M8 delivery. I think it's fair to say at this point that we don't really know yet because they don't really know yet. We have 10 more cars in Japan, which we believe were not affected in the south of Japan. There are some suppliers for Kawasaki in the north of Japan where the earthquake hit. And in that area, so we have to gauge that impact. The vast majority of the cars will now be made in Lincoln, Nebraska, not in Japan. But again, it's really a supply chain, and it's what impact it has on the management of Kawasaki. We also have on the New Haven line, starting today, another track program to replace defective concrete ties between Stamford and Rye. So we have, again, another track out of service. For about 4 months, customers will have to use bridge plates. What this does is, on top of all the other tracks out of service in Connecticut, which are quite significant at this point, it just puts more stress on the operation. Unfortunately, it reduces the flexibility and ultimately will reduce the reliability. We'll do our best to work around that, but that will be an issue until we start to get some of these tracks back over the next months on the New Haven line. Next on the New Haven line, I wanted to show you the Danbury branch. Linda, you're...
Howard?
Yeah.
On the concrete tie, I'm a full supporter of the concrete tie program, but given the severity of the problems on New Haven generally, Is that something that might have been deferred in order to...
No, Jim, this is not new concrete ties. This is the replacement of defective concrete ties. You may recall we have had, and I think Long Island had similarly, a program for many years to replace ties that were disintegrating. And this is the last element, I think, of about a 5-year program. So we had no choice but to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is on the Danbury branch. I want to show you, this was what happened about 2 weeks, on Sunday, March 6th, when we had a washout right through here. This is 20 feet deep, 150 feet long, and Sunday night, basically through some very good work, both in our Rail Traffic Control Center and then with our track patrol. We sent out a track patrol before the trains were operating for Monday morning. And in fact, the gentleman on the track patrol found this at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning as they were going up the track. Luckily, they stopped before they got on this. And so this was the washout we had on that Sunday. And then basically in the course of 10 days, show the next picture, Linda. Well, okay, this is just putting in some of the stone. Do we have one show it completed? No. All right, go back. Yeah, no, that's a different issue I'll talk about in a minute. So over the course, let me just leave that up. So over the course of 10 days, we had people working 16 hours, and they completely rebuilt the track, put back stone in there. We actually put in 10 million pounds of stone, which is a lot of stone. We rebuilt the track, and last Friday, 10 days later, we were able to start service again on the Danbury branch, full service. So it was a great achievement by our M&W forces. I will also want to thank MTA Bus, who was a major helper during these 10 days in providing buses along with the state of Connecticut. So that's where we are. So Danbury service is back. The next slide is the Upper Harlem.
Howard, I think you might want to just point out on that slide, that track is hanging in the air. When you look at it, it's an optical illusion almost, and it looks like it's sitting on ground. But it's in the air.
No, that's hanging. There's a guy down there. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. There's the guy down there. It gives you some idea of the depth.
There's no ground
underneath
this.
Yeah, there's the ground right here. Good point. Thank you, Jim. I've seen this so many times that I just assumed it.
Right. It visually can be deceiving.
Yeah. So that's what happened that night.
You mean it was not intended to be a bridge?
It's a new design, Jim.
Bridge.
A new design. Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. So then the next one, which we are still dealing with, is on the Upper Harlem line. So this is the NYSEG, New York State Electric and Gas substation. Has been flooded now for, I think, about 10 days. This supplies 2 of our substations on the Upper Harlem line. So we had a 10-mile stretch of track that has not had sufficient power when this happened. This is still underwater as of today. NYSEG thinks they'll be able to get in there within the next week or two. Then they have to see how much damage there is. This is this isn't part of the Croton Reservoir, so this is not going down quickly. So we had the day that this happened, we were able to work around it. We put in certain operating restrictions. You may recall the Upper Harlem line is very low voltage, does not have a sufficient number of substations for the line. This makes it worse. So we put in a series of different operating restrictions to minimize the number of trains coming through this area. So we'd go one at a time or slower speeds. We have been able to, again, our M&W folks working with NYSEG have been able to come up with some interim fixes. So right now we're running, I believe, with no restrictions, right, Bob? Except no M3s. We can't run the M3s up there because of the power draw, so it's just M7s. So we had some impacts on this, on the whole Harlem line, until this was fixed. So we had the interim fix, and then over the next month, hopefully we got a final fix. Lastly, I don't have a picture of it, but Newburgh Beacon Ferry is still out of service. The dock was destroyed by ice. And we are going in, and hopefully by the end of the week we will rebuild the dock so we can restart that service. And finally, on a non-weather note, we have joined Long Island Railroad with Cuckoo. So we had a press conference in Grand Central in February, introducing Cuckoo. So we now have two different ways customers can get real-time information. Our train time, which is good on the web or on a smartphone, that gives you exact information, and Cuckoo, which is good for people on a cell phone. Train Times had over 1 million hits since we put it in last year. Cuckoo in the first month had about 15,000 users. So it's a great service. So we have two different ways people can get information. So those are my comments, just to bring you up to date on all the different service issues.
Okay.
So then I guess we go to
Thank you,
Bob.
Howard.
Yeah.
Bob?
Good morning, everyone. Status of operations starts on page 104 in your agenda book. In February, we operated at 95.4%. This was below our goal of 97.8%. The Hudson line operated at 98.1%. The Harlem line was at 97.7%. And the New Haven line was at 92.1%. That was actually up from 88.9% in the month of January. All of the categories were below goal with the exception of the weekend service, which ran at 98.4%. And I'm happy to say that the month of March we are at 98.1%, so it seems like we're back on track after the rough winter that we had. Excuse me. Of the 28 days in February, we operated below 95% 4 times. Actually, all 4 days were below 90. And they were actually the first 4 days of the month of February. As Howard mentioned, on February 7th, we put a special schedule in which stabilized the operation. And after that, there was no days below 95% after the special schedule was put into effect. There were 715 late trains out of 15,666 scheduled, and 97.6% of our trains operated with a full consist. The Harlem and Hudson was very high at 99.8 and 99.5 respectively. The New Haven line was at 94.5. On the west of Hudson, service operated at 94.8% in February, which was up from 92.1 in January, but still below our goal of 96.4. The Port Jervis operated at 91, below goal of 95.5. And the Pascagoula Valley operated at 97.5, above goal of 97. 99.6% of trips were completed west of Hudson. And the MDBF for January was 56,175. That was below our goal of 125,000. Almost all of the majority of the failures was due to the M2, M4, M6s, the New Haven fleet. All were weather related. We had traction motors, pantograph lockdowns, equipment blowers, so that actually dragged the number down. M3 was low also. That was due to some brake and propulsion failures, also weather related. M7, you'll notice, is just slightly below, which speaks highly of the M7s and their ability to run through the inclement weather. That is the operating report.
Any questions on the operating report from Metro North? If not, financial and ridership.
Okay, good morning. January financial report begins on page 115. January results were favorable on both the operating deficit side and the cash deficit, being significant below budget. On the operating deficit was $56 million compared to a budget of $60.8 million, or 8% lower. The cash deficit was $6.9 million compared to a budget of $33.2 million, or 79% lower. But because this reflects only 1 month of activity and the fact that we experienced 5 storms, we expect much of this is related to timing. On the operating spending, there are significant reductions in non-labor spending. And on the capital program activity, a lot of the work was deferred due to forces being redeployed to the snowstorm recovery and lower project activity. We also saw that ridership was lower for the month, with east of Hudson ridership being 0.8% lower than the budget and only slightly higher than 2010 by 0.2%. Due to the snowstorms, what you also see was spending on overtime. And Jim, just getting back to your question, if you go to page 125, we have a new schedule that was put in place for this year that details out the difference between scheduled and non-scheduled overtime. And you'll see on this page that weather emergencies, we exceeded the budget by 29,360 hours. And that was related to the snow recovery forces and activity that took place. So certainly, we do budget for some level of storm activity. That budgeting is seasonal throughout the year, mostly concentrated in the first and the fourth quarter. But certainly, we saw in January with 5 storms a level above and beyond what we normally experience. Related to the storm also, we saw that diesel fuel for locomotive trains usage was up. This related to snow clearing work and higher usage on the New Haven line to provide for capacity due to the issues with the electric fleet. Fair operating ratio was 57.3%, 3.1% higher than the budget, also due to lower spending on non-labor expenditures. That concludes my report, and Bob will now cover ridership for February.
Good morning. The January ridership report is in your book starting on page 132. The preliminary February numbers were emailed out to you on Friday. I'm just going to talk briefly about the February numbers. February ridership, rail ridership, and overall ridership were up 2.2% in February 2011 compared to a year ago. Commutation ridership up 1.5%. Rail non-com up 3.4%. Particularly for non-com ridership, the weather in February after an ice storm early in the month was quite good compared to last February was a very snowy month, so that helped ridership overall. That said, the reduced train schedule and the crowding that we had on the New Haven line throughout February, as reflected in the standee numbers for the month of February, show that over 2,000 standees a day. Definitely affected, in particular, non-com ridership on the New Haven line. We estimate that it cost us about 3 percentage points for non-com ridership in the month of February, which translates to about 0.5% overall a loss of ridership or reduction in the increase we might have seen in overall ridership if not for the situation on the New Haven line. Any questions?
Questions on the February report? Okay.
Capital
program.
Good morning. The capital report begins on page 142, and I'd just like to update you a little bit. Excuse me. The west overpass stairs at Rye were opened up 2 weeks ago, and that project, the station project at Rye, will be completed in April. And we've just begun work in Peekskill on a major renovation of that station, where we're going to do overpass work, elevators, and platform work as part of the Peekskill and Croton-Harmon project. And if you have any questions.
Any questions on capital program for Metro North? Okay.
So we have 3 information items. Bob's just going to briefly speak on the ridership report, and then we'll take any questions if anyone has them.
Okay, the annual ridership and marketing report is in your book starting on page 148. I just wanted to give you a couple highlights. Overall, the results in calendar year 2010 are actually, we feel, quite good, given that we had service reductions that went in the second quarter, and also we're looking at the residual impacts of a June 2009 fare increase, which affected a significant part of the year. The things that we feel helped ridership throughout the year is, of course, the high quality of service delivered, 97.7% on-time performance throughout the year, and the high customer satisfaction with the service as reflected in the 93% overall satisfaction that we got in the 2010 customer survey. There was a real turnaround in the second quarter as we talked month by month. After about 15, 16 months of consecutive ridership losses, starting in April, we saw gains as the year went on through December. We saw those things ramp up, and I know pretty much all markets, all lines, we saw an improvement in ridership trends throughout the remaining 8 months of the year. Overall, at the end of the year, we had 81.7 million rides overall. That included 81.1 million rail rides and about 600,000 rides on our 3 managed connecting services. At the end of the day, 2010 is our second highest ridership year in our 28-year history, exceeded only by 2008. Any questions?
Questions on the ridership survey for Metro North? Okay.
And any questions on the other two reports?
Either human resources or spring-summer schedule changes for Metro North? Okay.
Okay, so Mitch, then we have, just let me speak to this one information item for 1 minute.
Yep.
So this is an information item, it's going to the Real Estate Committee. This is the sponsorship and in getting some money for commissary carts. This was a joint, this was a process that was led by MTA Real Estate, joint process with the two railroads to go out and try to make more money from the money we're receiving, both on a cash side, this is for both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, both on a cash side of payment as well as avoided costs in terms of purchasing or giving us infrastructure or carts to sell the products. So we went out, it was an RFP process, vendors were selected, there was then I hear music. Okay. There was then a negotiation that involved both railroads and the MTA Real Estate, and coming out of that was a deal that provides us with significantly higher levels of compensation than we were previously getting. So these two will be going forward. And I think, Chuck, you had a question?
I have a significant problem with this proposal. The net result is a total of $30,000 on the Coca-Cola side for both sponsorship and exclusive pouring rights, whereas Anheuser-Busch is paying $200,000 just for the sponsorship, a disparity of $170,000 benefiting Coke. Number two, there does not seem to have been an effort to bring in to the process entities like, just for an example, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, entities that can provide a full range of commissary type of products and that are well known for paying significant sums for sponsorship and exclusive rights. I'm troubled that this is not a sufficient amount of additional money for a significant, namely the exclusive pouring results. I don't blame you at all. I would be very clear about that. I just think this is not up to par. This is not what the public ought to be getting. And the last point is that people on the Metro North side will be paying $0.50 more for the same can of Coke than the people on the Long Island Railroad. Now, I may be parochial in that regard, but it ain't right. And in the normal course of events, it raises Robinson-Patman Act questions in my mind, and I'm told people have looked at that now and are comfortable that that's okay. It still isn't okay for me that Metro North people got to pay an extra.
So let me just speak to that for 1 minute, Chuck, the last part. There's a long history between the two railroads that each railroad prices commissary products based on its market and its competition. And so the history has been that for most products, not all, the competition is greater in Penn Station than it is in Grand Central. And so that we are pricing to that, and so the prices, when we sell, Metro North prices are typically slightly higher. It's based on what happens in all the other stores in Grand Central. It's not based on what's happening in Penn Station. And so we made a conscious choice that we would want to maximize this kind of revenue so as to relieve, so we maximize it and relieve impacts on the operating budget. So we are very much, in this case, I'll speak for Metro North, but I believe it's the same for the Long Island, we're very much in a very competitive market, and the pricing is based on what the market around us is doing. It's not based on equality between Metro North and the Long Island Railroad.
I understand that. Well, the competition simply serves to force down the price in Long Island and allow it to be maintained at a higher level in Metro North. That's good for the people in Long Island, ain't great for the people in Westchester.
Well, I think what we should do, this item is going to be on the Finance Committee agenda. The people from MTA Real Estate will be at the Finance Committee. I think those questions are perfectly appropriate and should be, the Real Estate Department is the one who negotiated these two endeavors, and as I don't know if Charles knows, but, I would not vote for the Anheuser-Busch one anyway. I don't care how much money it is. We should not be selling alcoholic beverages. But that's just my position. I leave that to others to decide for themselves. But let's hold those questions if you could. We're just passing this along to Finance, and I think at Finance that is the appropriate place to ask these as well as any other questions anyone might have. Okay?
Sure.
Next. Police, MTA Police.
Good morning. February, we had an increase of 37%, 26 versus 19 plus 7. Year-to-date, we're up 6 crimes. Basically, what we're experiencing is a spike in robberies and larcenies. On the east, the robberies are mainly Nassau County. We had 4 in February versus 1. 1 in Garden City. It was an individual was threatened with a weapon which was not displayed, and a wallet and a debit card was taken. That happened on the train in Garden City. Farmingdale, we had a force of a cell phone. We have a subpoena out for that cell phone. So far, there's no records. Merrick, we had somebody was robbed by an imitation person, displayed an imitation weapon. We made an arrest that was on the platform. Then there was a knife point robbery in the underpass in East New York. We have video of that incident in the time frame, and that complainant has become uncooperative, and nothing is shown on the video. So that individual was a homeless individual. We're going to track him down and follow that up, but we believe that was falsely reported. We're increasing our directed patrols, our train patrols, and our step-ons in those areas. We have no patterns, and we're working with Nassau PD on that as well. The larcenies are very spread out. We have a spike in District 3 in Jamaica and District 7 up in Dutchess and Putnam County. 4 incidents in District 3. A credit card was taken in Jamaica. That was used in Glen Cove. We have video of the individual using that credit card. We just need to ID that individual. We had a purse stolen from a sleeping victim on a train in Flushing. That credit card was also used, but we have no video of that. But we're actively pursuing that. We know what the individual bought Long Island Railroad tickets with that, so we're looking at the location where they bought them. Had some tools stolen in Hillside. And then in Flatbush, we had an individual who was distracted and was a victim of a pickpocket. The credit cards were also taken, but no usage. Up in District 7, Croton Harmon, we had a unattended bag taken off a train with a credit card. There was no usage on that card. In Brewster, we had property left on a train, which had a computer and a Kindle in it. We did recover the bag and lost and found, but the property was gone. And then Poughkeepsie had some metal tie plates were actually taken in December, but they were just reported now. They were last seen in December. So that's the spike in larcenies. Just to go back to the vandalism question that was mentioned earlier, as I mentioned, we look at criminal miss and damage. Out of all of the properties, we're actually seeing a decrease, 52 versus 68 year to date in criminal mischief incidents, but we will look more closely at the right-of-way, and we will continue to address that. But we're looking at that number includes stations, parking lots, trains, etc. Just St. Patrick's Day, I know it was very busy for everyone. Just to kind of give an example, we handled 32 aideds on that day, mainly, unfortunately, drunken young individuals. We handled 32 of those. On a normal day, we will handle between 12 and 14. And the majority of those, unfortunately, were in Grand Central. So we had a busy day, as I noted. Both agencies, had a busy day. And just very quickly, we had a very unfortunate incident back on March 12th, where the MTA police officers responded to assist Nassau County Police Department. 2 of our officers responded. Nassau Police was involved in a incident which involved an individual with a knife. That individual was shot by a Nassau County police officer and expired. Unfortunately, we had a tragic incident where one of our officers discharged one round from his firearm, apparently, which caused the death of a Nassau County police officer. As I said, it's a tragic incident. Nassau County is the lead in that, and the Nassau DA is also investigating it. We are assisting and cooperating fully in that investigation, and that is ongoing as we speak.
Thank you. And I know on behalf of all the members of the board and the people here, we express our deepest condolences to the officer's family in that regard, and we appreciate the follow-up by MTA Police on that issue. MTA Capital Construction. Mike.
Good morning. As it was reported by Alina on Friday morning, we had, in effect, the naming of the 2 TBM machines in Queens, and the work is expected to start mid-April. And at this point, we expect sometime in December the first machine to complete its run, and then they will be pulled back and do some additional runs. Overall, we have 4 runs in Queens, approximately 10,500 linear feet. The final TBM run in Manhattan is on its way on the 8th tunnel. We're averaging about 50 feet a day, and we expect to complete this sometime in May. Moving along in Manhattan, we started to install the waterproofing and erection of formwork in the cavern, and we expect to start the concreting operation in April. The concrete placement in the running tunnels in section to the north and south of the cavern have begun concreting in March, so we are proceeding there. The one milestone is actually that will be reached later this month, not much later, but later, is the central instrument location. There are 11 of them. One of them will be installed this month, and they're designed to support the new track switches and routes to both Penn and Grand Central, and this is the first of 11 such CILs that will be installed. Last but not least, we have opened a bid that was last week for a contract to repair the existing expansion joints in Grand Central. It was a positive bid, $4.5 million. We budgeted $7 million, so that was a good bid. And tomorrow we'll actually open a bid on CQ 032. This is the Plaza substation, and we're keeping our fingers crossed we'll get a good bid. A third contract for the mining and finishes within Manhattan contract was advertised in February with bids due during the second quarter, and that's proceeding. That's everything for the East Side Access currently.
Any questions on East Side Access? If not, we will go to procurements. Metro North?
Well, I think Lane is.
Oh, none in the book. So why don't we know? In the book, Metro North is first. So
sorry, Mitch.
I just read the next page.
I was looking at the agenda.
That's okay.
All right, so
217.
Okay, so we have happy to go next. We have 2 non-competitive procurements. One is with the OEM for brake parts for our M2, M4, M6s. The value of this is not to exceed $1.45 million. The second one is a contract with PHW for the design, fabrication, and delivery of cab signal systems for our Senador coaches and Genesis locomotives. We also have an option for the GP35 locomotives as well. This one is for $8.3 million. So be happy if there are any questions.
Any questions on either of these 2 items? Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Long Island?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed one. I'm sorry. I missed
Okay,
we
go
have
ahead.
a competitive one, too,
Go ahead.
for the replacement of air compressors on the Genesis locomotives. This was solicited through an RFP. We selected the firm, and the value of this one is $1.4 million.
Any question on that one? Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
Long Island Railroad has one item. We request that the MTA Board approve a resolution declaring that competitive bidding is impractical for our Queens Boulevard Bridge reconstruction. As you know, Queens Boulevard Bridge is in Queens County, and we will require very specialized construction involving temporary support of the bridge while structural work is being performed. I want to emphasize that when you adopt a resolution to allow us to use the RFP process, request for proposal process, that we will engage in a very competitive process with the construction industry. So it is in no way moving away from a competitive process, but it does allow us to look at the methods and means that the contractor proposes to meet our requirements. And we have found, particularly with the Atlantic Viaduct, that resulted in substantial savings both in time and money for the way we were able to progress that project. Any questions?
Any questions on this?
Yes, on this project, I mean, I support an RFP because of the complexity of the project. I just want to make sure, over the Queens Boulevard, currently there's 6 tracks, correct?
That is correct.
But the space for 8, as I understand it.
Space for 8?
Is that correct? Right. I think this part of the right-of-way has like 8 tracks.
There is there were
there?
6 mainline tracks east
Right.
of that location. It used to be.
Okay.
That's no longer
no,
true.
No, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
There's
and
so it's.
To my knowledge, there's only room for the 6 that are there. 4
Oh no!
in the main
After the Port Washington branches off, there's still a 6-track right-of-way. It's just only 4 tracks.
Right.
Right east of there.
Well, there's 4 for the main line and 2 for the Port Wash.
Washington.
Total of
Right.
6.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So there's no intent to increase the number of tracks. It's strictly the replacement of the bridge itself.
Right.
Okay. Charles, did you ever? Your light is on. No.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Okay. Any questions on this item?
Motion.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Capital construction.
Okay, before I actually pass it to David Cannon, the Director of Procurement, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that on April 8th at 10 p.m., Discovery Channel has a program. It's called Build It Bigger, and that will have a 1-hour program on our mega projects. And it will be very interesting to see. I saw a preview, and it's really great.
April 8th.
April 8th, 10 p.m.
Set your DVR. Okay. Yeah. For those of us who are asleep by then. Okay.
It's a Friday. It's a Friday.
That's for those of us who are really asleep by then. Page 228. David.
Good morning. Capital Construction has a total of 5 procurement items this month, which are all competitive, and a total $27.5 million. For time's sake, I will highlight just one of these procurements. One is the Queens Board Tunnel Contract, CQ31, for $21.8 million. $21.3 million of this work involves a scope transfer from future contract CQ032, which is the Plaza Substation contract, which Michael mentioned earlier is scheduled to open shortly. By moving this work from CQ032 to the CQ31 Queens Board Tunnel contract, we will reduce the risk involved in the schedule and save additional time by allowing the future system contractor the ability to take possession of the substation 12 months earlier.
Any questions on these items? Chuck?
That's the same amount of money that's budgeted in the original?
Yes, we will be removing the money from the CQ32 budget into the CQ31 budget. There will be no increase to the overall project.
Charles?
I have a couple of questions. With respect to the Northern Boulevard crossing item, am I correct that the default was committed by someone other than the new selected contractor?
Correct. The default was by Powell Foundation. He was defaulted. The contract was CQ028.
And am I correct that that was a default that was some years back?
Yes, it was a couple of years back.
And the last part of that question is, were the defects caused by that contractor?
Yes, the defects were caused by that contractor.
And is there any room for any kind of recovery, or is the construction bond all you're going to get out of this?
Yes, we have this default happened on a contract that was started, if I'm correct, in 2007, and when I got here, we were defaulting them. We collected $83 million on that, and that's the most and everything that we could or at that time collect, and we're not going to collect more than that. The costs that include that project and some of the things that we're fixing is somewhat in excess of what we collected.
Is the contractor still in business that defaulted?
No.
Any other questions on this item? If not, a motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Perfect. Exactly.
Time for-
All right.